Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel. Week 1 of the WNBA season is officially over. We are into it now. We're going to go through so much today. We're going to talk about a lot of the undefeated teams that are still that played really well in week 1. We're going to talk about a little bit of drama, a little bit of scoring records, and we're going to give you a lot of stories that happened this week. And finally, we will end off with our games to watch, plus a team that you should keep your eye on heading into week 2 of the season. Cal, you ready?
I'm always ready for the drama, the stories, the records, the whole deal. Last week, we finally had regular season games to preview, and this week, we finally have regular season games to recap. So I'm ready to get into it.
Absolutely. And speaking of drama, that's going to be our headline of the day today because the Las Vegas Aces, they received a 100,000 sponsorship from the city. That was kind of announced this week. And that's something that I don't really think has happened before, at least not in the W or just like women's sports in general, as long as like I've been around the sport. And I think my first reaction was, this is cool as shit. Like, excuse my language, but every single player is getting $100,000 from the city of Las Vegas to just keep doing what they're doing. There's also some other things we're going to go through in terms of their reporting. They have like some other responsibilities. They didn't find out about it until, they actually told them. They went through the player agents, all that. And my first thought was like, damn, like, does the city of Toronto want to sponsor me for like $100,000? Like, I would love that kind of money. Like, I would take that money, I would start traveling, like doing whatever I wanted. Not sure what they would sponsor me for, but like, it's all relative. But I mean,
This
my first
podcast,
gut,
hosting this podcast.
if anyone wants to sponsor Coast to Coast for $100,000, you have both Cal and I's full permission. As I'm sure you'd have Aaron's permission, who's kind of our boss at Her Hoop Stats. I think we would welcome that any day, anytime. Just putting it out there to whoever's listening, Nike, whoever, if you want to call, if you want to
100%.
get those new Sabrinas that are coming through Asia's shoe next year. I mean, this is just our call to action for it. But anyway, we're going so like on a tangent now because we just started asking for money. However, going back to the Las Vegas Aces, the original report said, and this is all reporting that I'm kind of pulling from, is coming from Callie Lawson Freeman on Twitter. Highly recommend following her, Callie at Callie J Law. She just became the latest beat reporter for the Las Vegas Aces and has done phenomenal work so far. So all the reporting that we're about to dive into has come from her and her work. So make sure you go follow her. But the original report that she wrote was that the city of Las Vegas worked directly with the players' agents to reach the agreements, like I just mentioned previously. They're similar to a name, image, and likeness, so an NIL deal, just like you see in college, between a third party and NCAA student athlete. It's a first of its kind partnership and had to be negotiated without knowledge of the team because of WNBA rules. So the Aces, Las Vegas Aces themselves, were not involved in this at all. This was between the city of Las Vegas, the player agents of every single player that's on the Aces roster right now, and then it was kind of told to them as a surprise. And then, because life's gonna life, the league's gonna league, the WNBA opens up an investigation into Las Vegas Aces. Amid, they go undefeated to start the season, despite the original details of the story, which clearly state that they went around so that they don't break any of these rules that are in the CBA. And here we go. This is the next reporting in the follow-up after this investigation is open. There is, quote, one issue could be the fine print of the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement, so that's the CBA. It prohibits teams and team affiliates from entering into an understanding in which a sponsor, business partner, or third party pays or agrees to pay compensation for basketball services, even if such compensation is ostensibly, wow, that's a word, designated as being for non-basketball services to a player under contract to the team. I know that's a lot of words, but basically they can't get sponsored just for playing basketball. And I think it was probably like the wording of like the city kind of telling the players all you have to do is play basketball was probably a bit misleading. Maybe that's kind of what triggered this. But this seems to fall within the guidelines because they said there was other things. They signed contracts like mandating them to reach mutually agreeable opportunities for appearances on the city's behalf. So like there's other things that are kind of involved in this deal with the $100,000 for each player. Cal, my first question, now that I've kind of provided the context for anybody who hasn't been able to kind of pay attention to what's happened, why was this something that had to be investigated so quickly? Especially because like some of the framing that was coming out of the reports that the league was investigating this was that they were labeling the bonus, like they were labeling the $100,000 as quote bonus payments, which would indicate that they were getting paid just for playing basketball, but that's not what this was. And so like I want to open up to you, kind of get your thoughts on this whole situation and why are we here? Why are we here?
It's a great question. And what you said earlier is the answer. The league's going to league. The WNBA is going to WNBA. That's how it goes. The general idea of this being like an NIL deal, that's not a new thing. Like NIL is sort of new in college, and we didn't really necessarily call it that in the pros, but that has been around in the pros for ever, like since Michael Jordan and Nike, like decades ago. And so the new thing that you know, when you said like this, I've never seen this before, this never happened before, is number one, doing it with every single player on the team as opposed to just a sponsorship with one or two top players. And I think Becky said that in the press conference. Usually they just go for a couple top players. And number two, like you said, the wording in the video that they put out about how we just want you to play. And obviously that wording was probably not what he would say if he could go back and say it, because then all these people can point to, oh, you're not supposed to pay to play basketball, which is not really what it is. He kind of just said that because it sounded cool. But like you said, they are reaching this agreement with these mutually beneficial opportunities to promote the city. They also have gear. They're going to be wearing gear around, like the city's going to give them gear to wear around the city. So they're doing things other than just playing basketball. That's just kind of like what came out of his mouth in the moment. But like, this is all above board. There's no reason that we need to pick this apart. And to me, like when I look at this and I look at situations like a few years ago when the Liberty with the whole charter flight situation, you remember that big story? And
I just know they were furious when this charter
yes,
program rolled out in the way that it's rolled out. Like I just know.
they were.
Yeah.
To me, like, we have people wanting to invest in women's athletes now, wanting to invest in the sport. And this article from Cali, great work, like you said. The CEO, one thing that stood out to me that he said, he was quoted in there saying, "We believe that this deal is good for us." Like, this isn't even a charity. This isn't like, oh, I love women's sports, I want to give money to it. This is like, they think that they're going to get a return. And I agree. I think when you invest in women's sports, you're going to get a selfish return out of it. And the city is going to see a return out of this. So we have these people now who want to do this, who want to invest in women's sports and women's athletes and teams and put money into it. But for some reason, we're still holding them back. We're still saying like, no, you can't invest this way, that way, or the other way because of quote unquote competitive balance, which on one hand, obviously leagues are more fun to watch when there's competitive balance and when it's unpredictable. But on the other hand, why shouldn't you be rewarded for okay, we know that this is above board, but let's just say hypothetically, for the sake of argument, that it wasn't. Let's just say the Aces wanted to give an extra $100,000 to all their players instead of the city of Las Vegas wanting to do it, which is obviously against the CBA. But to me, I still say, who cares? Like, even if they did want to do that, why shouldn't they be rewarded for having a competitive advantage and putting other teams at competitive disadvantage if they want to take care of their players? To me, if you want to pour into your players, whether that's money or bonuses in quotes, which this wasn't obviously, or setting up sponsorship deals, or just like charter flights, food, your facilities. Obviously the Aces have a great practice facility now. Anything like that, if you want to pour into your players, you deserve to be rewarded with a competitive advantage. That's my take. So even aside from whether this was against the CBA or not against the CBA, and I fully don't believe it was against the CBA at all, I don't even know why we have to have all this language preventing people from pouring into their players and investing in them for the sake of competitive parity, because I think that everyone else will rise to that level. What will happen if you let people invest in women is then those teams are going to win, and the teams that aren't, they're going to say, okay, now we have to follow suit. If we want to start winning games, we have to attract free agents as well. and we do that by taking care of our players in whichever way, you know, we want to do. So I don't really understand it at all. I think it's completely dumb, to be honest. And I get that that's how a lot of sports work, not just women's sports, and particularly the United States, is they have this like forced parity aspect, which is fine, I guess, in some senses. But women's sports in particular is growing so much more exponentially than men's sports that you have more and more people hopping on the investment train. So it's becoming more of like a thing in the spotlight with women's sports. And the league is going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to figure out how to let people invest in women's sports, because people are going to find ways to do it, whether the league wants them to or not. They're going to find ways to do it. So let's just let them do it. Let's just let people grow the game.
You brought up something that I was actually thinking about too, which is like the facilities, because like we're talking about this like competitive difference, but it's like not every team can afford to have like fully like proper like really nice facilities for each of their teams. Like you look at the differences, like you have the Aces, you look at the Liberty, you look at the Seattle Storm, which like Nneka Ogwumike has stated multiple times that really impacted her free agency decision, you know, to not return to the Sparks and to sign with the Storm because of the facilities that they had, you know, amongst the other reasons that she decided to join them. And it's like, so would you consider that a competitive advantage? It's like, how far are you going to go to be like, well, it should be equal, but then also some teams still have more than others, and that's fine. Like, especially like you talk about the charter program, like the way that it's been rolling out, where like some teams get to fly charter and some don't. And then you see that it doesn't really end up affecting the teams too much. Like some teams may take the charter and still lose because there are just so many different factors involved into like how a team performs. And yes, of course, they just all deserve charters because flying commercial is just a hassle and it would affect anybody. But it's just like at the end of the day, it's like, how do you actually measure all these things together? Because at some point you're just going to be holding the league back rather than allowing it to grow and being able to catch up with that growth. Because right now, like you said, it's growing at an exponential rate. And it's like, we need to keep up with that. And even like the Liberty, they just announced, you talk about like pouring back into the city. They just announced like $2 million in ticket revenue for their games, which like, you know, years ago, people love to say, oh, the W doesn't make any money. Well, they are making money, and they're making money for their city by selling all these tickets, by selling out these arenas, by selling out like merchandise and all these different things. And I don't know. It's just like we're heading into a different era of the WNBA. We're heading into a different era of women's sports. And so, yeah, I feel like stuff like this is just, it's also a distraction for the Aces player. Like, have we not learned to stop giving them fuel? Like they're literally about, you think about what they've done for the city of Las Vegas already. They're back-to-back champions, potentially about to three-peat this year if everybody remains healthy and they remain at the level that, you know, they've been playing at the last couple of years. And of course, that's like going to be beneficial to the city of Las Vegas. Of course, that's going to bring in money. Of course, that's why the city thought, hey, this is a smart business decision for us to do this. So I don't know. It's just, it's a lot. There's also, I feel like, inconsistencies with the way that the league investigates stuff. Like I know, yes, the Aces have been under investigation for several things over the last year or so, which like were deserved. But there are other situations with other teams where I was like, where's the investigation here? Or like, where are the conclusive results? Because I don't see any. Like you think about like what happened with Skylar Diggins-Smith and the Phoenix Mercury, which like she's on Twitter saying everything that happened to her, the way that she was mistreated, and it's just kind of like, oh, whatever. Like we hire the girl dad, and you know she moves on to a different team. So it's just like, how do you decide which teams to investigate and why? And I don't know. I thought A'ja Wilson had a very good response in her presser. I think Nick Hamilton on Twitter posted the whole video with Becky and A'ja kind of talking on this investigation, and you know. I think A'ja's a really good leader. And if you watch the video, you'll see why, and why we've talked about her so much for the last like year, and why we have a lot of praise for her as who she is for this Las Vegas Aces team. But yeah, there's a lot there. I'm sure nothing's going to come out of this investigation. And this is just going to be another thing for Kelsey Plum to be like, we've been through this. You can add this investigation to the list. And then we'll see how they continue to do it during the year. But I feel like we should actually talk about their basketball now, because, like I said, they did start the season 2-0. They're undefeated so far without Chelsea Gray, which, man, oh man, I need her back on the court so quick because that is your point guard. And she's not playing, but I know you had a couple of thoughts on that. They have won, but it's been a little bit close. They had a close one against the Fever, a close one against the Sparks. They clearly miss Chelsea, but they're still humming along, in your words, because they're so good. So, Cal, what are your thoughts kind of on the Aces so far in the first week of the season?
Well, yeah, they're 2-0 because they're so good, and they're 2-0 in single-digit games because they're missing Chelsea Gray, and we're used to them blowing teams out of the water. And the
Yeah.
margin for error is a lot slimmer when you lose your point guard for however long she's going to be out. You also have to give credit, obviously, to the Mercury, who shot really well in that first game, and then the Sparks, who we're going to talk about a little bit later on this pod, who played extremely well in that game. But the margin for error is slimmer, and the silver lining of that is that you're getting more opportunities for some players. We saw Kate Martin step up and play 25, 26 minutes the other day, had that amazing block. I think with Chelsea Gray in the lineup, you don't see as many opportunities for her. So Kate Martin, players like that are going to develop a lot more in this early part
I
of the
put
season.
I put Kelsey Plum's reaction to that Kate Martin block in the thumbnail. So in case you guys wanted to see, all photo credits go to each team. But yeah, that
Yes,
was incredible reaction from like the entire
so
team.
good.
It was it was
So
cool.
good. So good. Go back and watch it if you haven't. Probably should have clipped that one for this pod, but it was fantastic content. And yeah, I just think that the Aces have, obviously, Asia Wilson has been huge because we know, and especially in that opening night game, 30 and 13, she had 5 assists. She was doing everything and on both ends. And you had to know that was coming after everything over the offseason, after obviously that fourth place vote last year, after the releasing her shoe, not or the news of her shoe not very long before that game, home opener, getting their rings on ring ceremony night. And of course, the Mercury didn't have Brittany Griner. That was a big part of it. You had to know a dominant Asia Wilson performance was coming, and it did. And we also saw Jackie Young in both of these last two games step up big. That's the thing when you have four high-level all-stars, is that even without one of them, your depth gets tested, but you're still going to have players have dominant performances and be able to win games like that. So maybe you're not running away from teams by 30, but this is going to be good for them in the long run.
Yeah, and speaking of Jackie too, I thought she was great in their game against the LA Sparks. Even her and like Kate Martin had a little two-man game going on that was like they would give each other assists and it just looked really good. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen when your point guard is not on the floor in Chelsea Gray. So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff. We'll give the full schedule for the week later, but the Aces do face off against the Phoenix Mercury again on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. There's a lot of late games this week, but we'll get into that later. But let's take a look at some of these other teams around the league that are still undefeated and they're off to some really great starts. All right, so we're going to talk about the New York Liberty, the Connecticut Sun, and the Minnesota Lynx, who are all off to great starts. We're also going to talk a little bit of Seattle Storm as well. But let's start with the New York Liberty. They're 3-0. And as we're recording this, you will hear it on Tuesday. We're recording on Monday. They would have had a matchup with the Seattle Storm on Monday night. We record before it, obviously. But up until now, they beat the Washington Mystics. They beat the Fever twice. And I think some of the bigger stories to come out of this has been Jonquel Jones looking very, very comfortable. Although I do say, like, it's so random. I don't know what her problem is with Leah Boston. Like, there's been a little tension in those two games, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But drama. I guess that's the theme. That's the theme of this week's episode is drama. But Breanna Stewart and the Indiana Fever is like a love story, like an enemies to lovers to enemies type of thing, where like it's good. It's lovers for Breanna Stewart because she absolutely cooks against Indiana. And I'm so sorry to any Fever fans who are watching this or listening. She just always plays really well against Indiana, and she sees fire. She sees the Fever, and it's enemies for Indiana because they have to kind of go up against her and her big performances. But what have you kind of thought of the Liberty so far in their opening week of basketball?
Breanna Stewart, shout out to our friend Miles Ehrlich, who called her huge performance in the Fever in the first game, because last year the Liberty opened up against the Mystics. Stewie didn't play very well. Very next game, she dropped 40 plus against the Fever. This game, they open up against the Mystics. She doesn't play very well. Miles in our group chat is like, she's going to go off against the Fever. It's going to happen again. And she does,
Yeah.
obviously. Miles knows ball. But the Liberty have been playing so much better, I think, early on than they did early on last year. And obviously, you can see that this team has played together for a year now, and they have that chemistry. And of course, Jonquel Jones coming into the season healthy, whereas last year she was still kind of getting over that lingering issue from the previous year's finals. That's a big deal. JJ is hooping right now. And her MVP season, when you line up the numbers, they're much, much closer to that right now than they are to her last season numbers, which is huge for the Liberty. If they can get that level of Jonquel Jones, that unlocks a whole different potential for this team. What we saw last year in the playoffs, what JJ did, she's basically picked up where she left off. And then you look at the bench, they're still figuring some things out. I think Niara Sabali has looked really good in spurts coming off the bench for them, which is going to be huge. She's had probably her best few games of her very young career so far. And Benaja Laney-Hamilton on both sides, but especially defensively. I know we're going to talk about that. Outstanding performances from her. And so I do think we talked about the Aces obviously having a slimmer margin for error without Chelsea Gray. We don't know how long Chelsea's going to be out. I think she still doesn't have a timetable for return. The last news that I saw earlier today, the Aces are still the better team to me, but I don't think it's out of the question that the Liberty steal the 1 seed the way that they're playing right now. And if Chelsea misses any sort of significant amount of time and the Aces do take a couple of early season losses, I think by the time you get to the end of the season, the Aces are going to be the better team. But the record, I think, I still would favor the Aces, but I think the Liberty have a shot. The Liberty have a shot to steal that 1 seed, depending on how long Chelsea is out and the way that they're playing right now. And they benefit from the schedule tonight too, playing the Storm, because I think you would much rather play the Storm right now, coming off of back-to-back. NECA might not play. Obviously, the game that will be done by the time you're listening to this, 3 cities in 4 days. They're still in that phase of putting the new pieces together. You'd much rather get that game right now than play the Storm in September or whatever. So the Liberty benefit from that as well. So it's been a great start to the season for them.
Yeah, even that like 1-2 spot, I feel like it was already tight last year, but I feel like it could be even tighter this year. And we'll talk about the Connecticut Sun because I feel like that's another team that could challenge for that, especially if they remain healthy too. They also have a matchup as we're recording with the Indiana Fever, but up until now, they beat the Indiana Fever once and the Mystics as well. They've kind of had a similar schedule, which also means there's some similar themes that have come out of both the Liberty and the Sun games. And you kind of hinted at it. But before we actually get to that, before I forget, DeWanna Bonner, shout out to DB because she passes Candace Dupree. For any of our longtime WNBA fans who have been around for a little bit longer, DB passes Candace Dupree. So I'm going to throw in an LOL there. You know the context. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to move on from that. But she's now 5th on the all-time WNBA scoring leaderboard. And I just want to say shout out to her because although I'm not in a fantasy league last year, I've mentioned a couple of times on this pod that DB was the MVP of my fantasy team last year. And she's looking great. Like she looks comfortable. She's back on Twitter. So is AT. They also have fuel to the fire. If you're looking at a team like the Connecticut Sun, who, DiJonai Carrington posting before the season that Caitlin's going to end the season with the biggest assists, and AT's like, excuse me, and she starts the season off with a triple-double, which, DiJonai, after she was like, yeah, I was trying to add fuel to the fire for AT, but this is the type of season that we are going to get from the Connecticut Sun. You have DB playing still at a really, really high level. You have AT who starts the season off with a triple-double, which is like the biggest flex and the biggest like, oh my God, she's coming for her things. And then you also have like obviously Bree Jones back in the lineup, Olivia Nelson-Ndota getting some good minutes, Ty Harris getting some good minutes, but also defensively, I think they've shown what they can be. And there are 2 players in both the Liberty and the Sun that we want to kind of highlight here. Cal, you kind of hinted at both of them. But if you want to kind of take it away with like what you saw from both of these teams against the Indiana Fever specifically in kind of this first week of basketball.
First off, I love that AT had that triple-double in the Fever's opening game because the game with all the eyeballs, all the new fans who probably weren't familiar with Alyssa Thomas because they've heard of only one player in that in the league who was in that game. And Alyssa Thomas showed all of those fans who the actual best player on the court was in that game. I ate it up. But speaking of Caitlin Clark, I think we should talk about Benijah Laney-Hamilton and DiJonai Carrington's defense on her, because I'm not actually trying to throw shade at Caitlin at all. I think Caitlin has been pretty good. Like, she had 20 in that first game.
Yeah.
Obviously, her third game against the Liberty, she started to find her shot and started to figure some things out. But she's a rookie, and at the end of the day, like, this is a huge step up in talent and in competition from college to the pros. And I think a lot of maybe the newer fans or the people who or betting on Caitlin Clark to win MVP or whatever, which you should never do. What these people maybe need to understand, and I hope are starting to understand, is that this league has some incredible defenders. We talked about those two, Benijah and DiJonai. There are so many good, athletic, long, versatile defenders in this league. And it's really hard to go up against them night in, night out. It would be hard for anyone. It's not just hard for a rookie. And so I think that these type of players need to get some more love. And I hope that these performances with now ratings of in the millions or whatever because of Caitlin Clark are really putting some of these defenders and defensive performances more in the spotlight. And particular DiJonai Carrington, I think we got to talk about her because she has been outstanding. What she has done this year, she is far and away the front runner for most improved player to me. And I don't see any reason why this should be like a fluke or a flash in the pan or just a couple good games or anything like that. This feels very, very, very sustainable to me, what she's been doing these first two games. Obviously, the Connecticut Sun lost both of their starting backcourt over the offseason. So now DiJonai Carrington, year 4, gets a chance to step in, and she has taken it and run with it. And to me, the thing is, like, there's some things that she probably could even be doing better right now. She's only 1 for 7 from 3. You know, that's going to positively regress. She's a better shooter than that. She's averaging 18.5 without some crazy fluky hot shooting. She's running the floor really well. She's moving really well without the ball and making reads really well without the ball, which is huge when you play with a player like Alyssa Thomas, who's always going to find you. We saw that defense on Caitlin. She's been terrific defensively. I think DiJonai Carrington is a star in this league, and she is showing what some people probably already knew. And admittedly, I probably did not realize that she was going to be able to do this year. But after those first 2 games, I'm very on the DiJonai Carrington bandwagon right now. I think she's the most improved player, and it's not even really close in my opinion.
Listen, this has been building for 4 years now, I think, since her rookie year. Like, this is, like you said, like, sustainable is such a good word for it because I feel like she's just been, like, gradually getting there to the point where, like, now that she does have that bigger role, which she kind of got a taste of that last year, you know, like, in the playoffs near the end of the season as well, where she was coming in and she was contributing minutes. And now we kind of get a full season of that. Like, she's like in her next step of evolution as a player. And it's been really exciting to watch. I think one of the funnier things that I noticed while she was defending Caitlin is like the second Caitlin saw, like at some point in the second half, the second Caitlin saw that DiJonai was on her, she was passing the ball. She was like, I'm not doing this. I'm getting her off of me, which is funny, but it's like, you know, that's kind of indicative of like what it is. And I find the whole like rookies, like getting to know defenders of the league conversation so interesting and so fascinating because that's actually one of my favorite things to ask rookies. Like, I just remember I covered Michaela Onyenwere in her first rookie season with the New York Liberty back in 2021, and that was when the Liberty were not this like quote unquote super team. They didn't have all these players. They were coming off of a 2-20 season in the Wubble. They were not very good, like, period. Like, they barely like, you know, made the playoffs that year. It was like a whole mess. Or I think that was the year maybe they missed the playoffs. I don't remember. It was so long ago now. But I just remember Michaela had this really big role in the starting lineup because they didn't really have anybody else. So she wasn't a backup. And I just remember asking her because like she would go up against like Candace Parker, Asia Wilson, like all these players who it was like a huge wake-up call, you know, to enter the league and be battling against. I think of also Jordan Horston as well in her rookie season, kind of being a bigger role in that starting lineup and going up against all these like defensive players, going up against the ATs of the league and all these other players who are really, really good at playing defense. And it's always interesting because I feel like that's such a good teacher for these rookies to kind of could develop their game, because it's like, yeah, like you said, like it is another level, it is another type, it's a way different game in the professional league. And so yeah, I always love like hearing their perspective on it and being like, it's so cool that they're like going up against these players, but then they're also like, oh my god, I'm going up against these players and they're like actually insane to play against. And so yeah, Caitlin obviously, like, she's going to have a pretty big role with this Indiana Fever team, and she's going to face a lot of that. And so yeah, I thought her, like you said, like her third game against the New York Liberty was by far her best game of her rookie season yet. And like that's all it's going to take. It's going to take time to get more comfortable, you know, keep that confidence, find that balance between being who you are as a player and kind of adjusting to the players, to the new players in the league that you're now playing against and playing with. But yeah, I thought both DiJonai and Benijah, their defense on CC, Benijah is one of the best defenders in the league, like hands down. The numbers back it. If you watch her, the eye test or whatever it's called backs it. And so yeah, it was also cool. I think also the funny thing with Benijah too is like that pregame interview that she did with Elle, Shanae, and Drea, where she's like literally working out and they're like doing a live hit with her and she's like not even out of breath, nothing. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. She was ready, she was locked in, and she was ready to go, and we saw that in the game. But yeah, two really good weeks from both the two really good weeks. One really good week for two of the teams in the Liberty and the Sun. Will be 2 weeks next week. But yeah, all really good points. I thought, yeah, all things considered, Caitlin just seems to be improving every game too. So there's going to be growing pains like we kind of talked about for a bit, but shout out to DiJonai, front runner for MVP, for MIP.
Maybe MVP at this point. Why not? She's balling so hard.
I think AT will be like, no, you're not taking this away from me. Don't give her more fuel, Cal. She'll have a triple double like every single game the rest of the season. But no, those are two teams which like I think, you know, should be in the conversation for being in the kind of the top three with like the Aces, the Liberty, and the Sun, or like whatever order it ends up being. Because like I said, it could be an even tighter race this year, just based on, you know, how each roster shakes out and how they play and all of that. But the last two teams that we're going to talk about, I say team and a half because like the focus is on the Lynx, but we are going to talk about the Storm as well too. Before we get into kind of our games and team to watch this week, the Minnesota Lynx, they're 2-0, both wins coming over the Seattle Storm. The Lynx, they look really good. Like they look like they're going to be one of the most exciting teams in the league this season. Napheesa Collier is playing at that MVP level that she was kind of in conversation for last year, and I think she should absolutely be in the conversation for this year. And I'm hoping that conversation lasts the entirety of the season, because I think that would help really push this Minnesota team over the edge. But their new pieces are looking great. And I know you had some thoughts on that too, including like Alana Smith, Courtney Williams, you know, all these players. But what do you kind of think of those new additions and what you've kind of seen from the Minnesota Lynx so far in these 2 wins over Seattle?
I think they're fitting in really well with this team. And I think Cheryl Reeve is one of the best coaches, obviously, period, but at integrating new pieces and sort of taking players like Alana Smith and Courtney Williams and fitting them into this system. And it's so fun to watch them just thrive right off the bat. And with the MVP possibly in Napheesa, who is putting up ridiculous numbers. Like I knew how crazy she'd been going just from watching. And then right before this pod, when I looked up her stats, I was still like, wow, that's ridiculous. 25 and 10, 3 steals and 2 blocks. It's unreal. And the outside of a few missed free throws at the end of regulation in the first overtime in that Storm game that forced them to go to the second overtime before they finally won it.
Oh my God.
Wild game. Crazy game all around. But other than that, the Lynx have been fantastic. And to win both of those games against the Storm, I think it says a lot about both teams. But the Lynx, they're always going to be this team that ever since the Dynasty Lynx, I feel like in the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, this team that people seem to kind of like write off at the beginning of the season. And then, the last few years they've started out really cold and given people more fuel to write them off. And then they come back and end up being a competitive team. And last year, taking the Sun to 3 games and that best of 3 in the first round, even after they started 0-6, I think it was in the first
Yeah.
couple weeks of the regular season. And this year, they're finally getting off to that good start and reminding people right off the bat what they're capable of and what this roster has the potential to do. So really exciting to watch them.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I also want to give a shout out to Alyssa Peely as well, too, who we kind of talked about like what her fit might look like with the Minnesota team. She gets her first WNBA points in that second matchup in that double overtime game against the Seattle Storm. And after she get her first points in, which is like on this like very wide open 3 that Natisha Heidemann found like across the court, like just like heaves that pass to Alyssa Peely, who knocks down that 3-pointer. Oh, her confidence went straight up after that shot. She was like, I'm here. And so like you talk about kind of Cheryl integrating these players into the system. Like I feel like I'm starting to see that too with Alyssa Peely, who I know, like, we were kind of talking about how she might fit when she got drafted by Minnesota. But the Lynx are fun. Fee looks great. She's like, it's another thing where it's like, you talked about that dynasty team, and now after Sylvia Fowles retires, like all those other pieces that have kind of, gone away or retired super early, like a Maya Moore. You think about now, I think I saw a tweet the other day where someone was like, to think about the players who have now been in the league longer than Maya is crazy to think about. So I don't know. We probably don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we'll get emotional, but it's interesting because now Fee is kind of like, inherited that. And like you said, the last couple of years, they've gotten off to not so great starts. They get off to an undefeated start to start this first week of basketball, which is already just like the next step for them. And I'm very excited to see how they do. But the other side, the Seattle Storm, who lost those 2 games against the Lynx. And that second game that went to double overtime, they were like, oh, like, look at all these steals. But I think the story was like, look at all these turnovers. Like it was quite the game to watch. Are they okay? And that's what you wrote in the notes. Are the Storm okay to start the season off? And ever since we wrote that, they did beat the Mystics over the weekend. They do have that matchup against the New York Liberty, I think it was, that I wrote, that I think I actually forgot to write. Oh, it's on Monday, right? It's on Monday as we're recording. There's so many dates like in my head that it's just like so hard to keep up with. But they did beat the Mystics over the weekend, although depleted. They're missing Sykes and Shakira. And I'm just wondering, Cal, like, what are your kind of early thoughts on this Storm team, especially with like, I would say like the expectations that we had placed on them to go into the season, even though we said it might take some time. Like, I'm wondering where you're kind of standing on this so far in the first week.
I wrote, "Are they okay?" because I think "Will they be okay?" is a pretty resounding yes. But present tense, are they okay? I'm not sure. They did beat the Mystics, like you said, but it took a 22-11 fourth quarter to come back after they were losing going into the fourth quarter against a team who, like you said, was missing Brittany Sykes and Shakira Austin, in a team that even with those two, a lot of people had as maybe a lottery team or borderline playoffs. And the Storm got out of there with a win only after that really good fourth quarter. Obviously, they were missing NECA as well. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And NECA may or may not play tonight. And who knows? Maybe tonight somehow the Storm come back off this back-to-back on the road against New York and win. And then now they're definitely okay if they can pull that off. But like I said earlier, the schedule is not doing them any favors either, with how they're having to play so many games in so many days in so many cities. And obviously NECA banged up now. Jewel Lloyd needs to find her shot. We know what she's capable of, and we've seen her on, obviously last year, a team where she had to carry the team was shooting better than this. So that that's going to happen at some point. Shots are going to start dropping for her, but they certainly haven't been yet. That's been a problem. I'm not sure if Victoria Vivians is the answer as the 5th starter yet, but I'm also not sure I fully just have like an automatic answer for who should be. So I think that's something to watch for as well. To me, there's just like a lot of question marks with this team, and that's kind of how it works when you have a new team with a bunch of new pieces. And that's what the regular season is for. You try to answer those question marks, and then you get to the playoffs and hopefully have things much more figured out. So we'll see. And again, Monday night's game, by the time you're listening to this, will tell us a lot, I think, as well. But definitely not the start that probably the Storm wanted to this new era.
Yeah, and I think we saw like some flashes of what they could be within those 2 games. But it's a matter of like how do you string that all together and kind of come up with this like consistent rotation that you feel comfortable is just going to keep getting better with each game and is able to kind of, you know, execute down the stretch and maybe like capitalize off of turnovers or, you know, just be a little bit better playing in transition. Yeah, I clipped that game and some of the clips were just making me chuckle because they were very indicative of like how the whole game. I think there was like one possession where there was like 3 straight steals or turnovers, however you want to phrase that, in a row, where just kind of going back and forth. So yeah, I mean, like we said, it's very early. Week 1 of the season. That's what it's for. You're kind of seeing how everything works. And also like Nika Mule, what is going on? We need to get that visa approved because I can't even imagine what she feels like. I can think that she's just like itching to be playing because she knows that she can contribute to this team. And like, so to have a player that like you really want to be in your rotation, not be able to play with you and have playing time yet, I think is also another huge factor that we need to take into consideration. Because I think she was upgraded to questionable in the previous game, and then it was downgraded right before they started. So I don't know what the timeline is going to be on that, but I think they're also very much missing Nika to kind of like get the rookies games and playing time in a little bit with this squad. And I think that's something that we shouldn't overlook as well. But yeah, I think, the Minnesota Lynx versus Seattle Storm, like early season rivalry, like it was close at times. And, obviously they did go to double overtime. So they just need some time. But yeah, that's kind of the thoughts on the Liberty, the Sun, the Lynx, and the Storm from this first week of games. Do you have any final thoughts on them before we kind of go into our team to watch and kind of our full week schedule, Cal?
I don't know how this stuff works, but whoever approves the visas, can you just do it already? Like, that's my final thought. Like, what's the holdup? Just put the stamp or whatever that thing is. I don't even know. Just do the thing so she can play. That's all I want.
Yeah, I back you up on that. I agree. Let's get that visa approved. But yeah, all right, let's go into our games to watch this week. And something that we're kind of introduced now as the season's here is we're gonna highlight a specific team that like we're going to talk about what they did in week 1 and what we're kind of looking for in week 2, and also kind of give you who they're playing against and where to watch, all that fun stuff, so that you can kind of have like a good sense of like what every team is doing around the league every single week. And this week, we're going to talk about the LA Sparks because they are off to an 0-2 start. However, one of those is a very close one against the Aces. Another one was, I think, against the Atlanta Dream, if I remember correctly, which was also a very close one. But they have been showing some good things, Cal. What have you seen from the LA Sparks that you kind of liked in their first week? And now, because they've been in their games, they're just looking for that win in the second week of play.
This is about as positive of an 0-2 start as you could really draw up, I think, if you're the LA Sparks. Obviously, like you said, they competed in both games, especially in the road at Las Vegas, which is always hard to go in there and compete. And that when you look from an individual standpoint, Cameron Brink has been playing great on defense. I know she had that you clipped that play on offense as well. That was fantastic from her. When you look at Derica Hamby and what she's been doing, she is so back, and especially to see her do it against her former team and the Aces, 29-9, whatever the stat line was, remarkable. And then Lasia Clarendon to start out the season like AT did with a triple-double, their first triple-double of their career, which was also poetic to me because it came against the Atlanta Dream. And for anyone who remembers, in 2017, Lay had a triple-double with the Atlanta Dream. It was rescinded due to a stat correction. Lay was with the Atlanta Dream at that time. So went this whole time without ever having an official career triple-double after that. And now finally got an official one against the Atlanta Dream. So fun, so happy for her. And I just across the board, so many cool stories and so many positive notes that you can look at for the LA Sparks. So again, this is a team that isn't going to compete at the top of the standings this year, but these are the type of things that I think you look at and you can build up some positivity, momentum, just like around their culture and what they're doing going into next year. So honestly, this is a hard team to play against. I think a lot harder than I thought they would be probably a few weeks ago after watching the way that they competed. And I think they're going to get their first win this week. They got a schedule coming up where I think that they are going to get on the board. I know that we're going to talk about that. You have the graphic with their games coming up, but I'm ready to see them get a win because they've been playing hard and they've been playing well.
Yeah, let's pull up this schedule graphic for the LA Sparks. For our YouTube watchers, this is your reminder to head over to YouTube to watch Coast to Coast on Her Hoop Stats. But they play the Washington Mystics on Tuesday, May 21st at 10 p.m. Eastern. Like I said earlier, we got a lot of late games this week, and I'll get into the full game schedule for the rest of this week. It will be on League Pass, and then they play again on Friday against the Indiana Fever at 10 p.m. Eastern as well. That will be on Ion, of course, who have done a great job with their new studio show and just their second year of WNBA coverage. It will also be on League Pass for those who do not get Ion, such as myself in Canada, because we do not get Ion. So I see everything on social media, but I'm able to watch the games on League Pass. That's the schedule. Yeah, like you said, I feel like we've had so many questions about the Sparks over the last, couple of seasons about their direction, about their pieces, where they're kind of going, how well are they going to play. And I feel like you said, there's a lot of good stuff that has come individually from each player too. And they've kind of played pretty well together. Like you talk about Cameron Brink and Dearica Hamby together is just really, really fun hoops to watch. I think Hamby brings such a good veteran presence to this team, and she's playing really well. She's doing so well with the Sparks so far. And so Brink is having about as good as an intro to a rookie season as you could imagine so far. I think a lot of people have said this already too, but if you had to do the rookie of the year race right now, I think I would have Cam first in terms of just the impact that she's been able to bring to the Sparks team so far. And like I said, that late triple-double, Lexi Brown is back playing well. There's so many different things happening on this team where it's exciting and you can feel the potential there. But it's just a matter of more time and seeing kind of how things continue to shake out. But it feels like it's not as unknown or inconclusive as it has kind of felt in the last couple of seasons. So yeah, I mean, this is the new look Sparks without Nneka Ogwumike, which is weird, so weird. Without Chiney as well too, who still hasn't announced her retirement from the WNBA, but we just kind of assume it because she's just on the broadcasts.
Well, she's killing it in studio and without Jordan Canada as well, which by the way, I think it's really cool to see Lay, he's taken on a more ball handling role now because playing with Jordan Canada last year. So that's just another thing that I've enjoyed from the Sparks first couple games. But I'm impressed that you went out on that limb on Cameron Brink Rookie of the Year, even just so far, because the comments are going to be blowing up with that. What is about to happen to you.
Listen.
You don't hold back.
I said I thought Caitlin has shown, very obvious improvement in each of her games so far. But when you talk about instant fit and just instant performance so far, it's Cam to me. And I think that's going to change a lot. There's going to be other Nika coming in, getting more minutes from Rickea Jackson as well. Looking at when Camila Cardoso comes back into the Chicago Sky lineup and finally gets to have her start after starting with injury, seeing how Angel Reese continues to develop. Listen, this is not the final list. It's week one. This is what I have in week one. We're talking Sparks. We're talking Cam Brink. We're talking all of that. So don't come at me, please. I come in peace. I come in harmony.
I just love that you're willing to take the heat,
But hey, I stand. Listen, I do stand behind it. So as much as I don't want you to yell at me, if you yell at me, you yell at me. There's not much I can do about that. But yeah, no, I think we're looking at the Sparks this week. Like I said, I'll pull up their schedule one more time. Tuesday, May 21st against the Washington Mystics at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Pacific time on League Pass, and then Friday against the Indiana Fever. I mean, if you want to go that rookie versus rookie, they're playing Caitlin versus Cam. Also, another rookie in the Mystics, Aaliyah Edwards, of course. How could I miss her? We support her up here in the North. Got her first start, played really well. She's been kind of figuring things out as well too. So yeah, it's a period of growth for the rookies, and I think I really like what we've seen so far. But for those who would like to know this week's schedule, because I was actually attacked by one of my friends. I say attacked, but it's like playfully, for not tweeting out where to watch these games, because that's something that I've been doing for the last like 4 seasons, and I've kind of been slacking on it lately because I've been very, very busy with work. But here's your chance. So pull out your notebook, pull out your phone, giving you the full schedule for this upcoming week. We'll start with Tuesday, May 21st.
Okay.
I'll just leave out the
Wait a
weekend
minute.
games. Oh,
Wait a
here we
minute.
go. What?
Last time when we were on this pod and I gave out homework one time and you let me
Yeah.
have it for giving our listeners homework. And now you're on here telling our listeners to get out their notebook and take notes. I see where we're going with this. Okay.
Okay, but this is like copying, like this, they don't have to do any work really. Like I'm actually doing the work for them.
I got
Like
you.
you really
Okay.
think about it. They don't have to come back with anything. They can come back with YouTube comments if they'd like. But anyway,
No
pull out
test
your
on this
notebook,
later.
pull out your phone. No tests. You just come back to it when you want to watch games this week. We'll start with Tuesday. We got Wings versus Dreams, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. We followed by Mercury versus Aces at 10 p.m. Eastern, also on League Pass. And at the same time, will be Mystics versus Sparks, like I said, 10 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. All these games are on League Pass, so you can split screen to your heart's desire on those last 2 10 p.m. games. Then Wednesday, we got one matchup: Fever versus Storm, 10 p.m. Eastern, again on League Pass. Thursday, we've got one matchup again at 10 p.m. Eastern. We got Mystics versus Mercury on Prime Video. It's Prime night on Thursday, which, yeah, I told you, I warned y'all, it's a lot of late games this week, because then we get to Friday. And what's on Friday? Fever versus Sparks at 10 p.m. Eastern on Ion and League Pass. There's not a lot of games this week, but they are very late, so you can get those like midday naps in, those evening naps, whatever you need to do to stay awake for those games. You got this, and we look forward to talking about the games next week to see how they went. But yeah, Cal, anything else you kind of want to give a shout to before we get out of here?
Just want to say DiJonai for MIP. That's all I got.
Loud and clear, straight and to the point. We'd love to hear it. This has been Coast to Coast on the Her Hoops Stats Network. Make sure you're following us on social media at Her Hoops Stats, and that you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, Her Hoops Stats. And we are Coast to Coast. You can follow myself at Crina MM. You can follow Cal at C Wetzel 31. And we will see you next Tuesday.